Development Review Board to order. This is the meeting of August 15th, 2018. And I'd just like to remind everybody who's present to make sure that you sign in so we know you were here. And the next item that I have to check is whether anybody in the audience would like to make any comment on anything that's not on the agenda. And then I'll check with the members of the board whether anybody has any conflicts of interest on any items today.
Item 5.
Okay. So you'll be recusing yourself from item 5. And I would just like to disclose that the firm that I work for does work for Precourt Investment Co. in the legal field. I'm of the opinion that it will not affect this design review application, but if anybody thinks it does, then I will recuse myself from that one. I mean, in my opinion, it's just a fairly straightforward, almost rubber stamping of a design review.
Right.
So then we will move on to approval of minutes. We have the August 1st, 2018 minutes to take up. First of all, does anybody have any comments, changes to those?
I do.
Yes.
Page 7, second paragraph.
Is that your name?
My name.
Did I get people married up here or something? No, it's Jeff.
This is
Jeff
just a little.
Paula.
Jeff Paula,
We knew.
Yeah,
We knew who you meant.
so close.
L's up here and the Z's down there.
So the only thing I have is on page 3. This was Don Sharp's application, and we did have some discussion about the Airbnb use of short-term rentals. And the last paragraph of the applicant comment says, the accessory apartment is expected to be a long-term rental and may be used as an Airbnb on occasion. I mean, I suppose I came away with the impression that really the applicant was saying no. He had no plans to do that.
I thought he did.
He thought he did.
I think you said it was possible.
Possible.
Yeah, it was the possibility was out there because there were no regulations against it.
Okay, then we will leave it. That's
I
fine.
have one, it has to be as both present and absent. So, and that
Didn't even
brings up,
notice that.
there's only 3 people here that were at that meeting, so can we really do the minutes?
So we mentioned this at a previous meeting, and Ravi is saying that as long as we have a quorum of people here today, it actually doesn't
okay.
matter if we don't have a quorum of people who were there at the meeting, because it's a bit,
Oh.
it's kind of a rubber stamping.
Oh, okay.
But everyone that was
So-
at that meeting is here.
Just not a quorum.
Ah.
Yes, I was there.
Oh, you were there?
Twice in one.
Right, so I.
Oh,
So we did have a quorum.
so you do have a quorum, okay.
I don't know. I'm
So
not
you
feeling
were
the
not,
bug
you
tonight.
were not
went from
present,
being no
not absent. You were invisible.
Yeah, really.
Okay.
You're invisible.
So I will make a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting dated August 1st, 2018, as with the corrections noted.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Motion carries. So those were the August 1st minutes. Yes.
Also from the last meeting, I did not note this in the agenda that the July 18th minutes were not approved in the last meeting.
Oh, that's right.
And so that's something that could be subject for approval right now, even though it's not on the agenda.
Okay. July 18th. did you say?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, look at him.
no, but we did have them at the last meeting, in the
yes.
last
Right, we
packet.
did.
If anybody
Oh, but we didn't.
But we did,
If
we just couldn't
everybody-
approve it.
Yes,
Looked at
because you
them.
did not have a quorum to approve it.
Well, we did, but Jeff decided to abstain
Ah.
for the sake of being interesting.
Right, I wasn't there.
You weren't there, no. Okay, it must have been somebody else I'm thinking of. Well, I am comfortable making a motion that we accept the minutes of the July 18th, 2018 meeting as previously presented. Everybody should have had a chance to review them.
I was fine with them,
Yeah.
it's just we didn't have enough people, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Several seconds, thank you. Motion carried, that means, so that was the July 18th, 2018.
Need to vote on it.
Sorry. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
No motions. That was 5 then. Okay. All right. So then we will move on to the next item, which is our design review applications. And the first one is application DR 18-17, which is an application by Precourt Investment Co. to replace windows and install clapboard siding. The property is at 80 Shelburne Shopping Park and is located in the Village Centre District, the Village Design Review Overlay District, the Village Core Overlay District, and the Stormwater Overlay District. Is there somebody here to tell us about this application? Yes. Could you raise your right hand and I will swear you in? Do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you will give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. So if you can just identify yourself and give us an overview.
Brian Precourt.
Do you want to just run through what you're doing?
Sure. The property is located at 80 Shelburne Shopping Park. It's the old barn in the shopping center over in the center. Used to be, the first floor used to be the old shed barn grill. There's 2 apartments upstairs. It's been vacant for a little bit. I've been vacillating over what to do with that thing. I don't usually vacillate that long over properties. I actually have plans, I have designs for another building and tearing that down, but I didn't want to pull the trigger, so I'm renovating it. So the apartments upstairs will stay. We don't have a tenant for downstairs. The window changes, everything, if you've been close to the building, everything in it is fixed pane windows. There's some awning, small awning windows along the side. So some of the changes, we've owned the shopping park for 7 or 8 years. I've never rented it as apartments because I didn't want anybody living in that thing. So the window replacement is sort of code issue too, because the fixed pane doesn't meet the egress windows. So we're putting in some of those windows just to meet code, and we're gonna gut the thing and redo the utilities. And anyway, so I don't have a tenant for the downstairs. I haven't been advertising it. We're gonna sort of get it fixed up and then I'll put it on the market. I don't know what'll be there. If there is a change of use, if it isn't a shot in a beer bar, then I'll have to come back for a change of use. So that's about the crux of it.
Seem as if there's any issue.
The use right now will remain the same based on Brian's testimony and his application materials. And if there is a change of use, as the applicant has stated, then that would require conditional use review. So.
Can't make it look any worse, so. Yeah, it's pretty bad, so, anyway.
Any comments or questions from the board? No. Any comments from the audience at all on this application? No. Okay, so then I will make a motion to grant design review approval to Precourt Investment Co. LLC for replacement windows and new Hardi plank clapboard siding at 80 Shelburne Shopping Park, with the condition that a zoning permit shall be required prior to commencement of construction.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favour? Aye. Okay, motion carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, again, we are a little bit ahead of time. The next item is application DR 18-18, which is an application by the Town of Shelburne Veterans Memorial Committee to add 2 flat granite plaques for World War I and World War II veterans. The property is at 2 Church Street and is located in the Village Centre District, the Village Design Review Overlay District, the Village Core Overlay District, and the Stormwater Overlay District. Is there anybody in the audience to speak to that application? So if you could raise your right hand and I'll swear you in.
Okay.
That right? I hereby swear or affirm that the evidence, do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Do you all have in your package the picture?
Yes.
I think if I talk to this, it would be very, very simple. Okay? My name is Sam Feidelberg. I'm chairman of the Veterans Committee. We've been in existence 3 years since the plan became a project of the town. So the committee is officially a town project. We began 11 years ago to have the project that you now see when you travel down. And if you look at the black spot, which is the entrance that you should be all familiar with, the plaques for World War I will be on the left, and the plaques for World War II will be on the right. And the diagrams below show you those veterans. We have taken a lot of time and trouble to identify all of them, get the names straight, see if any are still alive and or the families are around. Currently, plaques are on the town hall front door and on the old Pearson Library, but they are not visited the way the monument is visited. And the conditions of the plaques, really, we shouldn't be moving them. And the fact is that one is a metal plaque, and the other is glass and metal name tags. So they, taking those off and restoring them was a bit of a burden and cost. So we decided to go in this direction. And the request is to install those 2 new plaques, which will be produced by Barry Granite, and that's the same company that produced our star and originally. And they are about a foot away from the entrance to make sure it's not crowded, and about 3 foot high, and their carving or etching will be large enough to easily read. So basically, the proposal is to go ahead with this, and if it meets your approval, and the cost is about $14,500, which is part of the original package of funds that we raised for the first memorial, and so we have the money to expend on this and do it well. We have a committee that tends to the monument. It is made up of 3 veterans, and in some cases the wives help us because to keep it weeded, etc., and keep food out of it when we have the Shelburne Day on Saturday. We'll be chasing all the kids and everybody who carries all the food up to find a bench, because the benches in the circle are really for memorial purposes, to sit there and be able to view your family brick and be undisturbed. So we don't want it overrun as a cafeteria. We're not mean when we kick everybody out. We just wear our hats and walk up with a little smile, and they're gone. Okay. Yeah. We're lucky we do not have, it's minimum abuse of the monument in terms of a week. Maybe 1 or 2 people will smoke, or dogs, which is not a problem, but they do occur. And generally, we meant it to be an open monument that you could visit and sit, and hopefully that the members of the community and the owners of the bricks, which are $100 per brick, carved and installed by us. And we started out with the hopes of maybe 200 and 250 bricks, and we actually have over 450. So it's really been something. And that is generally where we're at. I have a shovel outside, and if you say yes, I'm going over to dig the first stone. Yeah.
I mean, Ravi, I don't see any questions. No? Anybody in the audience who would like to comment? No?
A question, just for clarification. Everything is flush with the ground, is that correct?
Yes, right,
Okay.
right. Yeah,
Thank you.
because you need to be careful in terms of attentiveness to cutting grass and everything else.
Okay,
you know.
thanks.
So then I will make a motion to grant design review approval to the Town of Shelburne Veterans Memorial Committee for 2 flat granite plaques for World War I and World War II veterans at the Veterans Memorial at 2 Church Street, and with the condition that a zoning permit will be required prior to installation of the plaques.
Yeah, that will all be done by the granite people. And
Seconded by Lisa. Thank you. All those in favour? Aye.
okay,
Okay.
you made my day.
Thank you. Thank you for coming.
64th wedding anniversary today, so I'm gonna go
Congratulations.
home. Gonna go home and thank you on behalf of my wife, or my wife on behalf of you.
Congratulations.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay. Ian is recusing himself, and then we will take up the next item, which is application CU 15-05R1, SP 15-03R1, which is continued, not from our last meeting, from the one before, right? Okay. All right, so things are changing. It looks like, I'm not sure that it exactly followed, but. So,
Not really changing, but there's a lot of clear,
oh, sorry. I'm really on the ball tonight. Not. Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you. All right, we can resume.
Yeah, so I think we needed some clarification since last time we were here, and some getting you all up to speed, and Ravi and us up to speed. So that was, I think we did that. Ravi came out to the farm and got, a lay of the land there, and saw that what we're proposing to do is not a major renovation change to the building, but more just enhancing the experience of the customers that are currently coming. And yeah, so moving forward, the request is for seeking the approval to continue the building out of our septic system, which we had only built to half capacity, so doing that full capacity. And then for Mike, who's here, who runs the Café portion of the business that runs there, to be able to expand his operation so we can seek a wastewater permit from the state of Vermont, then he could make more prepared foods in a to-go capacity, with the idea that over time, the proposed timeline is 2 to 3 years of integrating a few seats into that space.
And so the change from the last time you were here is that now you're a cafe slash restaurant as opposed to, sorry, because I know you were here only 2 meetings ago only.
Well,
went through
yeah,
this,
and I'd
but-
say that it's not really a change. It's we were focusing on some other things last time, but
Right. Okay.
yeah, I want to emphasize just so he's currently a commercial bakery and focusing on gluten-free baked goods, using farm products, but also using a lot of non-farm ingredients as a bakery, but shifting the focus of the food that he would be able to prepare that would be more focused on the food that's actually being raised on our farm, in like to-go style meals like salads and light lunch type things. Yeah.
I mean, the last time you were here, we were sort of focused on the definition of integrated agriculture and the
Yeah.
relative proportions of primary and secondary uses.
Right, and I think that served the work that Ravi did and the meetings that we had to
Okay.
show him. We got more clarification from Dean Pierce, and then also just got more about that definition. We looked into the state regulation that was brought up last time, and we think that it's more, at this point, more appropriate to seek this approval. And yeah, I think we just clarified that we fit into the integrated agriculture definition, and that the changes that we're proposing with going from the bakery to these more food-based meals is appropriate within all of that.
Can I take a shot? So in summary, restaurant cafe is out, integrated agricultural use is in?
Well, we applied to be integrated agriculture in 2015 and got that. So what we're seeking now is just a change in the use, because before we were just being a bakery, so now we're asking to be able to do prepared foods as well. So go beyond just the bakery definition, and to do that, we need to get a wastewater permit from the state of Vermont, and then we'll need to in order to be able to be approved for a few seats up to 10. We would need different permits on the state level.
Okay, and that's what you are seeking, correct?
Yeah, but from your perspective, what I understand, it's a change of use from what we applied for as in our integrated ag. We spelled out, what we were doing and what we foresee doing. So this is just a change in that, as far as I understand.
So if you look at in the memo, so in your previous approvals, there's a list of what uses were included as a part of their integrated agriculture use. And one of the things that was included was a bakery. And now a bakery, we don't have a definition in the zoning regs for a baker, essentially. But we do have something for a restaurant. And this is something that possibly 5 years, 10 years down the road, that someone that's, not myself, but possibly the next zoning administrator, the next director of planning, someone that would go to Bread and Butter and see like, oh, you have tables. I don't know how that fits into your integrated agriculture use.
Right.
But this is doing something that's, I guess, preventative, and also allows them to incrementally grow the way that they want to grow, essentially. So that's why this request is an amendment to that previous approval in 2015 to include a restaurant cafe use into their integrated agriculture use.
Okay, so then what do we need to be aware of for a restaurant use?
So in this case, it would have to be with the consistency of the activity with the district, and possible undue adverse impacts of that type of use that isn't characteristic of the rural district.
Okay.
So that that would possibly include traffic impacts. That would possibly also include uncharacteristic uses that aren't found in the rural district. And one method that staff saw of maintaining the character of the rural district while promoting the growth of the applicant's farm and business is to somehow curb the cafe use by curbing the space in which the cafe activities could operate, by something that was done with previous cases in previous applications, controlling how many seats the cafe restaurant can have, and to curb not just the space in which the cafe restaurant would be operating, but all the structures that, with exception to farm structures, because staff does not have purview over farm structures. Anything that is mixed use, that we would condition that expansion would require conditional use review. I do have a couple of things to note. So I did receive a letter from the neighboring property owner, Sarah Dopp. I was not able to include it in your application materials, so I'll pass that around. And also with the bakery hours, something that I was not able to include in your application materials because of time, that the applicant, Mike Proya, supplied me with the hours of the bakery, and it would be Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 2 p.m., Saturday, 8 a.m. to 1 p.m., Sunday, it's closed, and that they do not intend to expand the operating hours of the bakery along with the cafe restaurant, that it would be the same. And if I am mistaken, that you can correct me on this. But I'll pass around this email as well, so you can record down the hours of operation.
Okay. Questions? Anything else from the board? Anything else?
If I recall correctly, last time, you were talking about not really doing anything, or the expectation that the people who would utilize the restaurant cafe are the folks who are coming to the farm already. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, I'd say the goal is to increase the point of sale, like the current point of sale, like our current base, to increase that, yeah.
And then will there be additional advertising about the new restaurant cafe type thing outside of
What we
the
normally have
word of
done.
mouth and what you've already done?
No plans for that,
Okay.
yeah.
So it's a cool idea. I love it. The one thing that I just want to make sure we protect ourselves and we protect you guys is that this is for farm use, which is really good. And in my mind, that's what's important here. If you wanted to go ahead and just sell Twinkies from the, have a restaurant that wasn't related to the farm, it would be a different thought, a different feel, a different discussion, in my mind. I'm asking the board, is there something that we should put in here to say that, the cafe should be focused on, farm-produced products, local? I'm searching for words right now, but the intent is that the cafe is there to promote local,
Yeah.
grown there.
Yeah, and honestly, that's the whole point, the whole mission.
I want that to detail so that no one can challenge it. You do that. I mean, that's what you're doing. We put it here, and then you go off and do your thing, and then no one could really give you a hard time because you're working.
Does it suffice to say something like the products shall be, produced at or from that farm? Produced
Yeah,
there?
like-
I think that's already part of the integrated agriculture.
So if we could work that into it, that would be fine.
So, as part of page 3, you can see the breakdown of the 3 criteria that count as integrated agriculture. And since they are still integrated agriculture, they are still subject to these regulations under 1910-5, I want to say, 1910-6. And so with that, as the zoning administrator, I can actually ask for yearly revenue to see if they still qualify as integrated agriculture per these regulations, to see their income breakdowns for primary and secondary agriculture use. I can't look at anything that's exempted, but because that's out of my scope. But for primary and secondary, that is something that I can request to make sure that they still qualify as integrated agriculture use.
Okay, so we could put, do you want us to put something?
It says the cafe is to be focused on
Shall-
integrated agricultural activity.
Shall be run within the parameters of
Yeah,
their
yeah, something like
integrated
that.
agriculture, primary and secondary uses or something. You know, it kind of goes without saying because
Yeah.
this is all part of, like you say, your integrated agriculture
Right.
sort of status. But is there anybody else in the audience who wants to make any comments?
Gail Albert, and I just wanted to say that.
I guess I should swear you in.
Sorry.
Remember this time. Do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence that you're about to give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of
Yes, I
perjury?
do. I just want to wholly support what they're trying to do at the farm, and the whole concept of integrated agriculture seems like it's integral to what they're asking for. So I just want to say that they've really made a great contribution to the town, and it seems to be, to my view, as I think we were the ones who instigated the integrated agriculture when we started the winery. It seems to be right in line with what that's all about. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? No? Everybody's happy with the specific conditions that Ravi set out, plus the one that we just mentioned? So I'll try and make a motion then, if there are no more questions or comments. So I will move to finalise the record for application CU 15-05R1. And is there another one? I thought I read out two. An SP 1503R1, both of them?
They withdrew their site plan review application
Oh,
on July 27th. And that has been noted at in the second paragraph of the memo
Okay.
on page 1, that the applicant is also withdrawing their previous request to change their site plan that would allow
Okay,
for
to allow
parking.
the parking. Okay, which is that second number, so
Exactly.
okay. So then it is only application CU 15-05R1. And I will further make a motion to close the record with an indication of approval. So to that end, I will move to direct staff to prepare a decision indicating approval of conditional use application CU 15-05R1 as prepared by Elizabeth Pierce, to amend the integrated agricultural use approval at 200 Leduc Farm Road to include cafe/restaurant use, with the conditions that 1, a zoning permit shall be required prior to the alterations pertaining to the specific request by the applicant. Secondly, the proposed cafe restaurant shall only have 10 seats. Thirdly, all seating for the cafe must be inside the farm store. So the hours of the cafe will be as provided by the applicant, namely Monday to Friday, 8 to 2, Saturday 10 till 1, with no expansion planned. I don't know if that's a condition or not, or 8 till 1, sorry. The applicant shall run the cafe within the parameters of their integrated agricultural status, specifically in relation to those primary and secondary uses. Any physical expansion of the farm store shall require conditional use review. And finally, just to note, all previous conditions concerning the integrated agricultural use still apply.
Second.
Seconded by Mark. Thank you. All those in favor? Aye. Okay. Motion carried. Thank you. Thank you, Ravi. What's that? Oh, he's... Can we summon, is Ian, he must be still here, is he? Maybe. Ravi, are you in a position to summon Ian back in, please? Since
One other thing too,
Oh,
Mayor. Our representative for item 6 is here.
There's Sarah Dopp.
Neighbor's name?
Yeah, I just want to know the record for
Her name, I think, is Sarah Dopp. D-O-P-P.
What was the letter?
So our representative for item 6 is on her way. So until then, we can discuss anything that is other business. I mean, you can run it. This is your show, Joanna. Sorry.
And we can move on to item 6. Okay, any other business? Does anybody have anything apart from what's on the agenda? Nope. Well. So what is, so somebody is,
That I do not know. I was just talking to Dean, and Dean said, "Oh, she's on her way. Don't worry." So just like stall him or something. Yeah. So it's item 6. It's in italics. Discussion of Town of Shelburne zoning bylaws, section 1900.7.
I'm on my way. I'm leaving the house.
so who is coming?
It's Kate Lally from the PATS committee and the Planning Commission. Yes.
And is there a particular issue about section 1900.7?
So based on the review of applications on the June 20th meeting, yeah, so there was a lot of confusion, I guess even for me too, on how to interpret section 1900.7 on what exactly that bylaw indicates and how exactly to enforce it on my end and how you would go about reviewing applications, subdivision applications, site plan review applications on that.
I think in particular
No, I didn't.
where it mentions an alternative facility, we were a little,
That was the big discussion on what qualifies as an alternative. Alternate
Which subsection is that?
that's under B.
Oh, right. Main is sole discretion and alternative.
It
facility.
really
With this language.
pertains to the residential zoning. The first, under A, it's pretty clear, but under B, it's a little vague.
Is that all right?
I guess I didn't review those June 20th applications in enough detail.
We had some applications on.
Yeah, with two applications on Spear Street.
Basically would end up with a sidewalk. This guy had about 600 feet of frontage on Spear Street, and he's subdividing the property. He would have ended up with, I think, 600 feet of sidewalk that, you know, kind of started and stopped and
Yeah.
Didn't connect to
didn't connect to anything. And
Not even close to
the same thing with another property, the Farrington property. It was a similar situation.
Right?
Yeah, not quite as much, but
Mr. Chair, I have a question on, not on the applicant, but on the notes that were put into the application from staff with regards to integrated agriculture. Can we open that up and go to page 2? And the thing that, I may be slightly, I just want to make sure, because I want to make sure the record goes right, but where it says here, from section 2110.78, primary integrated agricultural activities include on-site preparation crops or produce not primarily produced on. Why does it say not? I don't get the not.
So, that's where page 3 provides more clarity, where it's not, we're not looking at 2 things under integrated agriculture. We're actually looking at 3 things under integrated agriculture. We're looking at exempted, state-approved agricultural activities, which is agricultural products, horticultural, viticultural, forestry, dairy, livestock, poultry, bee or any farm products, or anything that falls under farming, really.
Okay.
And those are all outside my purview or Dean's purview or a town local zoning bylaw purview. And so that actually includes, for bread and butter, their burgers.
Yeah,
Because
okay.
they produce everything, they grow everything and produce everything on site. So many of the things that Mike is producing part of the bakery, as long as the wheat is grown on site, as long as the berries are grown on site, as long as anything that's inside those baked items that is grown on site, that is exempted. But if he has to bring in, I'm trying to think of tropical fruit, lemons, oranges, or pineapples, to make his baked goods, that falls under primary integrated agriculture activities.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's just weird language.
It's the primary versus the integrated, okay.
exactly.
So it's the word primary that, put primary, then you gotta have the not in there. Okay, understand.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, no problem. So again, I think Gail Albert, who came here, Dean was telling me the history of this, and that it was developed for essentially Shelburne Vineyard, because at first they did not have enough grapes for winemaking.
they still don't.
They still don't, so they bring a lot in, and so a lot of it is actually considered primary integrated versus exempt.
Versus integrated.
Versus integrated, versus
Okay,
exempted.
got it.
And all the secondary stuff is their like decanters, their corkscrews, all the whatever knickknacks that they sell. That's not food. So in order to accommodate this and accommodate any sort of farm activity that's moving towards compliance with Act 143, we have this more lenient local bylaw that promotes farming activities that want to try something new.
Okay, thank you.
That was good enough trying to stall. Is she here?
We stalled and we got a little smarter.
Another thing to note is I do have decisions.
Can we get started on that now?
Yeah, if you'd like to get started on this. So if you have any questions,
Those are the 3, the ones you distributed today by email?
yes.
These are all from August 1st.
Yeah, those are all from August 1st, and then there are 2 for today's design review.
Oh.
Oh, and that's just signed by the chair anyways, right?
Yeah.
So-
Yep.
So I have a question. Can we temporarily adjourn to deliberate and then when Kate shows up, restart?
Yes.
Is that allowed or not?
Whatever.
I
deliberate.
mean,
I'd like to talk about the Mount Philo Road application. Oh, Kate's here.
Yay.
You are.
Just pull this off. Never been on this side of the seat before.
So I'm Kate. Hi, everybody. I'm on the Planning Commission. So,
I believe so, yes.
Sometimes I forget.
so,
So let me swear you in first.
oh, okay.
Do you hereby swear or affirm that the evidence you're about to give in the cause under consideration shall be the whole truth and nothing but the truth under the pains and penalties of perjury?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay. So I guess I'm here to talk to you about sidewalks and paths and walking and things like that. And Ravi sent an email back in July that explained some of the, confusion that you guys have. And so hoping to try and clarify things. So one of the things that we're doing right at the moment is we're working on the town plan update. And there's a transportation section in that I think makes things pretty clear. And more broadly, the future land use section in the updated town plan really integrates land use, transportation, and stormwater resiliency in kind of several steps further along than we have up until to date. So what will emerge from this are better regulations and stronger, clearer regulations. So anyway, in the meantime, I wanted to talk about the importance of having bicycle and pedestrian facilities, particularly on the main roads and in the growth areas, just as a starting point. So to use the example of Spear Street, we're all aware that the Quiniesca project is going to happen at some point, and that's going to bring quite a number of new dwellings, and it's likely to increase traffic and that sort of thing. So we want to have a future town where people can have transportation choice as much as possible. And frankly, walking on the bike lanes on Spear Street is really not comfortable or safe or pleasant. The only people who are really kind of okay with that are those spandex guys, like super competent bike riders. I mean, there's a reason you don't see anybody walking there. And it's not something that, where people are inclined to let their children do. So we would like to have a future town that enables multimodality. And some of that will happen along the town's roads, and we envision that happening through facilities like sidewalks, multi-purpose paths, things like that. And then there will be some hopefully some more paths along the lines of like the Ty Hall path and things like that. So that's kind of where we're going. And we'd like to kind of connect up neighborhoods and sort of set up a informal network of residents being able to get around in their town, on foot or by bike, safely, comfortably, pleasantly. So that's kind of the overall vision of where we're going. And you guys are in charge of, setting up the decisions that enable this to emerge, right? So on Spear Street in particular, we would like to have a multi-purpose path. And I'm back up just a second and say that I'm also on the Paths Committee, back on the Paths Committee, and we're working on a map that will indicate what facility is desired where to make it like a lot straightforward and clear to folks, so that you're not in a position of like, what do they mean? What do they envision for this place? So we understand that that's not really fair to leave that all up to you. And so we're going to be providing more information about that. That being said, on Spear Street, it is a particular concern of ours because of the anticipated traffic that is going to be expected to increase with the development pressures. And we are also in the town plan, we'd like to really leverage our existing growth areas as the place that can receive most of the anticipated growth. And we're working on ways to disincentivize a lot of that growth going into the rural areas, so that we can actually end up with a town that enables what the state planning goals are, which is a village core with relatively some, dense but not as dense development around it, and then surrounded by open lands and a countryside. But that's what we'd like to try and preserve, right? So that makes it really important that we ensure that, and we'd like to have a place that people can walk and bike more comfortably. So what this means is that as these lands in the growth areas develop, and that would be on Spear Street to the west, right? That's the growth area. It's really important that we end up with off-road bicycle and pedestrian facilities, particularly in those areas. And so what we would like is for we would love to have a multi-purpose path down that whole side. And now we realize in saying that there'll be gaps in between. There's places where there's already some existing development. But we would like to have a multi-purpose path that comes down ideally from the South Burlington line, and that can then funnel into the wonderful facilities that are on Webster Road. And that's just a straight shot right into town. And that really leverages our existing system and it expands our network. And so that's just like one visual right there. And we'd love a path on Barstow Road. We would love a path on Bay Road eventually, although that's figuring out how to achieve that is going to take some time because it needs to happen in a way that is more context sensitive and that sort of thing. So that's kind of the big picture of where we're going. And then let me see, there's some, I just want to make sure the questions that you guys had that were sent to me in this email were, where the sidewalk should be built if only needs to be built on one side of the road in the residential district. So I think we're going to be getting clearer about what we mean by that as we move forward. I think in general, people on the Planning Commission now, commissioners are starting to see the benefits of moving towards a more form-based type of planning that is more prescriptive, that is more neighborhood-based, speaks to the scale of the neighborhood, the street, the block, these kinds of areas. So we're going to start to become a little clearer about what we mean by this. So again, it's not left up to you guys to, try and figure out what's going on here. So let's see, the feasibility of building sidewalks through the residential district, and what an alternative facility is and what purpose it serves and its design elements. So I think that the alternative facility, an example of that is what I was mentioning on Spear Street, a multi-purpose path that could then connect into our existing infrastructure. Building sidewalks throughout the residential district, what we're really concerned about is the public roads, not it so much about sidewalks within developments. It's about creating transportation choice. So it's not transportation, multimodal transportation, just as like some fun rec thing that you do every once in a while. That maybe you drive someplace and go and walk, right? Like you do right now at Shelburne Farms. No, the idea is to be able to actually get out of your house. And if you live in the growth area, you can walk to the farmer's market, or you can ride your bike to the farmer's market. Or more importantly, your kid can ride to school or to the library or something like that. You can get on your bike and go pick up a gallon of milk at the store or whatever. That's where we're kind of going with this. Maybe, who knows, maybe that will enable people to maybe not have so many cars. That's the best way to reduce emissions. So that's kind of where we're going to give you a picture. So it's really it's really the focus is on roads that are on the town roads and public roads, which are tricky at best for navigating as a pedestrian or a cyclist. And, we are promoting in the town plan, and the zoning will follow, the idea that, well, it's not an idea, it's a principle that multimodality is as important as vehicular modality in this town. So we have the same standing. Pedestrians and cyclists have the same standing. And, we're hoping that we can advance the idea of, with the select board, of adopting a complete street policy. And we also hope to totally revamp the public works standards at some point to, kind of calibrate how this all would happen in various settings. So those are our goals and aspirations. And here we are in the present day, and we don't have those regulations in place, and so you guys are trying to make sort of like best guess decisions about what it is we have in mind and intend. And so I would like your feedback on what you think we could do in the short term, because these things, redoing the public works standards and kind of revamping the zoning, and these are all sort of big things. Are there some small things that could happen in the really near future that I could get the Planning Commission to focus on, and we could get changes made and help you guys do your jobs better?
Well, I'm just going to say that, well, first off, thank you for coming and explaining your thoughts and everything. But, you're mentioning Spear Street and some of these other areas. I continue to see concerns expressed about safe pedestrian and bicycle travel in the village. I drive on Spear and Webster every single day and see plenty of cyclists and pedestrians too. So I wouldn't necessarily think that there are the same concerns about those areas as there are in actually making the village a safer place for pedestrians and cyclists. And then with regards to Webster Road, there is that beautiful multi-use path, but with regularity, there are cyclists going up and down Webster Road on the road and not using that path.
I will go down Webster Road. I will not go down that path because I'm going too fast down that path.
I mean, people
I will go up that path though.
on their bikes should be in the road.
Yeah.
I mean, it's more like getting a safe place for people that don't feel comfortable on the road.
And the walkers.
And the walkers,
And the runners, yeah.
So I'm just curious, I think, so your committee will be coming out with kind of a master path plan so that when we get an application, we can look and say, okay, you're on the west side of Spear, your lot or property is designated to have a multi-use path, so we can require that segment to be built. So it'll be pretty specific on east or west.
You went fast on that one. So back up.
What?
So now, okay, so your property has now been designated where there's going to be a multi-use path. Congratulations. Now what? Are we going to force that landowner to put the path in? Are we going to have the land condemned? Is the town going to put in the path?
It would be within the town's right of way for the most part. Maybe some, maybe a portion of it would be, but it's a condition of getting development approval. And
What is a condition again?
of having the multi-purpose path easement and construction there.
Well, let's talk about that some more.
So the landowner would bear the cost of that path as well.
The developer would. The developer would.
What if it's not We're not developers, it's
Some of these are
landowners.
just landowners. They don't,
Well, this would be a development condition. A condition of development would be that the path would have to be built. So no, this is not just. I mean, that would not happen until the land developed. And so can I just speak to your concerns about the village? Okay, so we're looking at, livability and the viability of this community way out into the future, 25, 50 years, right? That's our planning horizon. So, the walkability and so forth in the village, which is very much a priority, and I think everybody is on the same page about that, and that has, is shown in the, dedication of resources and so forth to achieving that. I would say that it's just as important that we have that in other parts of the town. And on Spear Street, that area is going to be very much degraded if we have a ton more cars coming down there. And, just as if, Quiniesca has to go through Act 250, just as Act 250 is going to require things like a turning lane and all of those kinds of things to mitigate against that, that's what we're requesting with the application of the development regulations to achieve a multi-purpose path along there. So, and we recognize that one side of Spear Street is part of the growth area, and the other part is, supposedly going to stay rural. However imperfectly that happens. So, there is a method to this.
Noble goal, I think it's great, but my concern is kind of the reality of it and the common sense of it. So that if you've got, say, a person, I'm not going to use, say, developer, I'll say a landowner on Spear Street, and say it's 100-foot frontage, and we say, okay, you got to put in 100 feet of sidewalk or path. So you're going to have this like blotch of sidewalk that starts from nowhere and goes nowhere. And if you do that all over, the drone from above is going to see all these little patches of things that go nowhere. So, and it makes me hard for me to understand how you will ever reach your goal. So if the goal is, I want to have a path or sidewalk on Spear Street, why don't you say that? And instead of, just focusing in on little pieces of development at a time, because you'll never get there. I don't know, maybe say there's going to be an impact fee on all developments, and you put that in the piggy bank, and then when you got enough, you build that whole path.
Now, that's something that is beyond our ability to, that would have to be a select board decision, but that might be part of the toolkit that we come up with.
So I think it's a discussion, because really I'm concerned that we won't accomplish what you want to do. You're just going to have little footsteps all over.
Right. Well, and that's the part of the point of you guys being the DRB. You have some latitude to determine, what makes sense in what context, right? So I would say that in a context where, you have several hundred feet or, of frontage, absolutely, a path should be part of that. In some place where there's maybe something much smaller, then, that opens the door for maybe other opportunities. But I think things that should be taken into account are, goals and objectives for that specific area. We are focusing, as you mentioned, Lisa, on the village first and then sort of moving out, right? So, but I wanted to make sure that you guys understood that the edge of the growth area is, this is the vision for it. I mean, we'd like ideally there to be kind of a hard line where the development ends, and then you start to see a much more rural pattern of development, or ideally more open lands beyond that. So it's really clear where it is. So if you have that, and then to have people, their main mode of transportation is walking in the street, I don't think that is sustainable or ideal over the long run.
So I have a question. I mean, the way this is written, in A, it reads that it'll be required. In the village center, village residential, Shelburne Falls mixed use, museum, mixed use, commerce. So it seems like in those we have no choice, like it has to be put in. It says, shall be required along public and private streets. So I don't see where we have the latitude.
So the Mount Philo application, is that one of the designated, is that in the district that they're going to be required to put a sidewalk in?
It's in growth too, I think.
It's in Grove 2 and residential district.
So they are or not required?
So they have, Andy Rowe has argued that they are not required. He mentioned this in the last. Yeah, it's our call, but he has argued that they are not required because the opposite side of that street has a sidewalk. And so that's something that when they come back, that's something that they will mention again, I think.
Well, we'd like to make it clear, in what we do, like, well, what do you do in a situation like that? How do you thread that needle? Are there some other upgrades that are necessary in that area? We have a bicycle and pedestrian paths committee. It's about putting some money in to facilitate the walking and biking infrastructure in the town. You were mentioning an impact fee or some other kind of fund where that money could go. I don't think that just because a sidewalk is only intended to be built on one side of the street, that if you're in that zoning district, you get off the hook because, oh, lucky you happen to have property that isn't on that side of the street. I think in that instance, they should have to pay into some kind of a fund. Or enable some kind of a crosswalk section that connects the property that's developed over. I mean, that sounds like an equitable solution to me.
I think
I'm just
you're putting
curious.
us in a tough position.
I know.
Yeah,
the way this reads, we don't have a lot of latitude. I mean, isn't that
It's
right?
crazy.
I mean, it's
We're just subjecting the town to lawsuits.
Take for example, Kate, Spear Street, south of Bishop. Some years ago, that was widened and they added a pedestrian bike lane there. And so, I mean, and they used to be striped, maybe it still is striped. They just striped that section of road today, actually. Does that qualify as an alternate facility in that case?
I'm sorry, where is this?
striped shoulder.
Spear,
A striped shoulder?
South of Bishop Road, between Bishop and Irish Hill.
I mean, it has a white line and some space.
It was
around.
widened, before you guys all lived here, we spent a bunch of money. We built a 6 or 7 foot shoulder on that road, all the way to the town line going north.
And running
And that
on-
was the intention of that expenditure by the town. So
Right.
my question is does that qualify as the alternate facility if we have a developer or a landowner who wants to do some subdivision on his property?
No, I would say no, because that's just not safe as a way to get around. I mean, you're just kind of dooming somebody. And then what happens is that let's say changes occur over in the future, and then the Shelburne taxpayer is on the hook for trying to pay to have some kind of a sidewalk or something put in. I think
Absolutely.
Shouldn't that
It's benefiting the
be-
public.
Yeah.
I think, so I'm starting with a couple things. So first of all, I don't think it should be up to the DRB to decide whether or not trees should get cut down and a right-of-way should be allocated for a path. I'm just taking on that case that we had on Spear Street, or down there, because that's not our thing. If there was a master town plan that said, here's where the paths are going to go, we can work with that.
Right, if you take the topography on Spear Street, there are areas where it makes perfect sense to put it on the west side of the road. It makes it much more constructible, and it makes perfect sense to put it on the east side of the road. So we kind of need to know, and there's a lot of sections of Spear Street, for example, that's never going to see any additional development. It's built out. So
You'll have a hole there
it's
forever.
never going to happen. And
Right.
exactly what David is saying is that you're going to have this patchwork of trails that start, stop, and it makes it pretty cumbersome. So I'm definitely in favor of some type of an impact fee. I drive Barstow Road and Spear Street every day, at least once a day. And Barstow Road is really, really dangerous.
Absolutely.
You go up on Spear Street from Bishop to Irish Hill, it's a lot wider.
Yeah.
And that lane was built for that purpose. Go measure the road. I mean, there's like an 8-foot shoulder there. So what I'm saying is I'd like to see anybody who's gonna develop property in any of these districts, put money in a fund, and maybe let's focus on Barstow Road first, because that's way more dangerous than the section of Bishop Road, or Spear from Bishop to Irish Hill. Let's prioritize, and do we wanna put it on the north side of Barstow or the south side of Barstow?
Right.
Do a right-of-way study. In some places, the right-of-ways may not be consistent down through those roads, or there's some huge obstacles. Which side are the utility poles on? Big difference. If the utility poles are on one side or the other, it's gonna impact costs considerably.
So, if you've got, a comprehensive plan over that shows the priorities where these paths need to be, that makes it routine for us to see here. And the second part of it is just the mechanics of funding it. And I think it's gonna be more global, like an impact fee, because if you got a developer putting something in, and the sidewalk's already there, well, great, lucky you, but still pony up, and we can use that someplace where there's another priority that has want for funding.
There's a plan, and then we can execute on it.
Right.
Yeah, but what do we do now, though, because we've got this requirement? We don't have a choice. It's not like, we don't do this on setbacks, so it says you shall build a sidewalk on all public and private roads.
But there's escape clauses, unless. And that's what we've been
Well,
using
there
so far.
isn't. In A, there isn't. In B, it's an alternative path, which we now know is even a bigger sidewalk. So there isn't, there really isn't an out. So I'm just concerned that we not apply this kind of nilly-willy.
Yeah, I think it does really come down to what David was saying earlier. I mean, it makes no sense, at least in my mind, that we have this application. I actually missed the meeting, but this is why this has come up.
Yeah.
That if we have a person a landowner who's going to subdevelop into, and he has 600 feet, or however many hundred feet it was, it just makes no sense to say, and you must pay for a path when the path's not going to connect to anything else.
And there's no plan, it's not part of any sort of articulated plan.
Right, whereas if it
Path
was.
May or may
not
not.
gonna maintain this little patch that really.
Town doesn't want to,
purpose.
right?
It'll be very expensive to maintain that, because it's in the middle of nowhere. And I'd rather see that, in that particular case, or similar cases, a chunk of money go into, let's focus on Barstow Road. Let's pick from Spear to Governor's Lane. Let's put a multi-use path in there. And start contributing to that fund, because,
Or South Burlington, I mean, the pennies for.
penny for pass. We got grant money to build the, I know we got federal money to build the path on Webster Road. That's why it's as wide as it is. So,
Even that stretch you were referring to on Spear Street, south of Bishop, I mean, that is a big difference. It may not seem as if it, you seem to think it wasn't that significant, but as somebody who runs on that, the traffic is right there, but you have, as long as the white line is maintained, you do have that separation, which is, in my mind,
extremely different.
it makes a difference.
Barstow Road, for example, is,
Very different. Where you're always jumping off the road.
and, yeah.
So what do we do now? I mean, my thoughts are, I'm gonna look for every loophole I can to not force a landowner to do it. If there's an alternative path that works across the street, awesome. Until the town comes up with a comprehensive plan that we can work with, we don't have that now.
If we have to tell these people, you've got to build a 5-foot wide, concrete sidewalk, you're talking, it's $10 a square foot. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, and otherwise you're outsourcing that to Shelburne taxpayers.
Right.
You know?
Shelburne taxpayers are gonna benefit from it, though. It's the public that's gonna benefit from that.
Right, and what's wrong with that? The public
taxpayers should pay
benefits.
for it then.
No, the public benefits from, you manage, you don't let them just do whatever they want in terms of
I'm a private
transportation.
landowner. I wanna take my lot, and I wanna make 3 lots for my family. I own 600 feet of road frontage. I'm gonna force that landowner to put in 600 feet of sidewalk to make 1 lot into 3?
And maybe that's a place where we really don't care. Maybe it's like really low on the priority for Shelburne, for bike path, but the rules say you gotta do it.
Or maybe looking at the larger plan, that's not the best place for a path.
We really need that larger plan and the priorities and an alternate way for funding it.
Because if you, in this particular case, and I hate to get into specifics, but if you go north on Bishop Road, or on Spear Street, there's a house up there that's virtually on the right-of-way. There was a big issue with that some years ago about the thing being built too close. And if you were to build a 5 or 8 foot wide multi-use path, either right at the edge of the pavement, or if you had a green space, you know, you'd either have to do a major road realignment, or you're gonna be on the guy's front porch.
So I guess
So-
I guess you guys are saying that cars are the only things that have the priority in this town.
We need a comprehensive plan from the town that we could work with. Just verbal language that's written down here that isn't tied to here's where the path is going to go. We can't work with that. We want to see maps. Here's where it's going. It's been approved by the select board. Maybe the town had a chance to vote on it. And there's some source of funding. The funding piece has got to be discussed.
When I started, I think I started with qualifying, I think this is a great noble goal.
Absolutely.
But you will never get there. You will never achieve your goal if you're gonna piecemeal this with an undetermined time span or way of funding this in an integrated way. You have to do
don't
that.
think it's a fair statement, Kate, to say that myself or anybody on this board only believes that automobile transportation is the single goal here. I don't think that's a fair statement. I don't know how you got from to there, but I don't think that's
Well-
a fair statement.
It just seems, on my end, it seems that you are saying that, you know, Jeff said he's going to look for every loophole he can.
There's no plan. There's no plan. There's words and verbiage, but there's no map that's been approved by the select board and the voters that say, here's where we're going to put our paths. If we had that map, we could act on every single application that comes in here that intersects with that.
But the problem right now is we have an ordinance that what we're going to choose not to enforce. I mean, I don't think that's good either. I mean,
Absolutely.
Right.
It's
you know,
something that,
it's going to make us look arbitrary.
Okay, so if I'm understanding you correctly, what you're saying you need is a map that shows where all the intended infrastructure is going to go and what type it is. And you also want an impact fee or some kind of mechanism that you can require applicants to pay into.
That's probably beyond us, but right now, what we're subject to doing is making the landowner pay for that, and that I don't think is right.
that's one possible mechanism, Kate,
Yeah,
is an
that's-
impact fee. I
that's
mean, it's just a suggestion, I mean.
Well, there could also be a threshold that allows, you know, individual property owners to pay in a smaller amount into a fund, but if it's, say, so many, maybe it's over 10 units, that kicks it into the developer. I don't know.
Don't know.
I mean, for example, I don't know how closely you've looked at the Quiniosca or the Snyder development. There's a path that's
Gonna go all the way along.
part of
Spear
that,
Street.
part of that, so, and with the issues, I mean, half of the Quiniosca parking lot is in the right-of-way.
Yeah.
Right now, there's a problem there, so
But I mean, like,
that makes sense to put on that side of the road, but drive north, go down by where you turn off to go to Shelburne Heights. A lot of those houses are really close to the road, and does it make sense to do a crosswalk device to get people on the other side, or, to say that, you know, you gotta have a path, and, you know, it's a requirement, you're gonna pay for it, you're gonna build it, you're gonna put it into a fund, is great, but I think we need to really look at, okay, this makes sense to put a path here, we need to go on the other side of the road over here, so I think that would help both the developer and would help us.
So from
or
a
the landowner.
feasibility standard, you know, this having paths even in an incremental emerge incrementally does help quite a bit. So I don't know if you guys are aware, but we were awarded grant money to build a sidewalk that will connect Rivercrest to the across the bridge at Falls Road to the sidewalk there, right? So unfortunately, that's going to cost more than the grant that we were awarded. So there is an application that is coming up. This is how all of this kind of integrates, right? There's an application that will be coming up before you guys at some point. And that little bit of sidewalk that would go across the frontage of that project, would slice 200 grand or something off of the price of this sidewalk, which would allow us to leverage the money that we have, for completing the rest of the project. So that's how this integrates, and I realize that's an easier kind of condition to imagine because it's right next to the village than someplace more in a more that's currently in a more undeveloped state, farther away.
The
What's
landowner's
that?
going to pay an extra $200,000 to finish that?
Well, whatever the cost ends up being, I mean, I don't know what that will be, but yes, that's the regulations require that. I mean, that's what the ordinance says, that they supply that sidewalk.
We just approved a 3-lot subdivision or a 4-lot subdivision just east of the Falls Road Bridge. I can't remember if there was a sidewalk in that. There is a section of sidewalk. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, well, that may be the it was a Bart Frisbee or something?
Yeah.
Yes, right, that's the project,
Okay.
right. So, so that was factored in with our news about getting this, being awarded this grant. So that's how, that feeds into all of this, because it's incredibly expensive to do this after the fact.
Well, I mean, take that as an example. I mean, whatever is required of Sterling to do that, you can see that fits into a larger plan. And I hate to go back to this example, but it's the one that was in front of us most recently, and this is the one up on Spear Street, close to Irish Hill. So it's 600 feet of frontage. We're going to ask somebody to pay to put in a path, and the question they're going to ask is, well, for what? Well, because this is part of the plan. Well, what plan? We don't know. Is there a plan to connect Irish Hill to Spear? No. That's the position that puts us in. To ask somebody to incur a significant, in this case, a significant cost for something that feeds into this more sort of amorphous, esoteric plan, but it's not concrete, and so they're sitting here wondering, well, why are you making me do this when we don't even know if this comes to fruition? So, I mean, that's why I guess we're saying it's a lot easier for us to do, because I mean, we kind of call balls and strikes in those, and as much as we can. If it feeds into a plan, we can say, this is the larger goal, and this is how this cost or whatever feeds into it. And I still would agree. I would like to see, some sort of way for us to share that cost a little bit. But
part of it too, Kate, is what do I need to build? Do I need to build a 5-foot wide standard concrete sidewalk? Can it be a paved path? Does it need to be 6 feet wide, 5 feet wide, 8 feet wide? Because some of those grants, I know the Webster Road grant, that came with some requirements by the government that said it's got to be this wide. So if, landowner X builds here's a 5-foot concrete sidewalk, and then next thing you know, you guys get a grant to build a path there, and you've got an 8-foot requirement and a 5-foot sidewalk. Those are the kind of things that need to get put into the plan a little, we need to not only what do I build it and where, do I leave a green space between the road and my property? Do I put it,
Well, and what happens when there's not enough right-of-way?
and if there's not enough right of way? And there are a lot of those cases that need to be looked at. So do we have to flip it? Do we have to flip it to the other side of the road? So we don't have the, capacity to make those calls.
Okay. All right, well, you've given me some very good,
Keith, let me ask, what are the top 3 takeaways you're getting from us?
I'm getting that you are reluctant to have a private developer pay for public infrastructure, which mystifies me because, you know, if it were water or anything else, that would be a no-brainer. So my second one is that this makes more sense to you in the context of a place like the Village, which is an existing kind of more walkable place, and you'd like to see more information about what is intended in other places that are where it's not so clear cut, and because otherwise you feel unprepared and unable to make a decision based on lack of information. You need more information. And the third thing is that you know, you would like the discretion to require somebody pay into an alternative means that doesn't necessarily result in a facility being created in that location, and that might be an impact fee or something else. I would add to that if we end up going in that direction, that there would be the requirement that an easement for a future path or sidewalk or whatever is envisioned long-term for that area, present existing conditions notwithstanding, that be secured at the time. So
That's
that,
probably the most important piece of language that you could put into any document is having to do with the easement. Because that can get extremely cumbersome and expensive to go back if the town has to go back and start to create easements. I mean, that's
right, and you have
that's a
people who
huge
are
burden.
unaccustomed to having something here, and, you know, the element of surprise, this is a small town, people complain, you've got, you know, maybe your neighbor is on the select board or something. It's difficult for people in that situation to stick to their guns. So that's why anticipating as much of this as possible. So it sounds like we need to do a lot better job of providing guidance and clear direction, and we need to give you some tools that will enable you to achieve some of these objectives. But I think that the securing of an easement is incredibly important. And it gives an escape hatch, you know, as things develop and change, where we can have something.
So we need something in here that says that.
Okay.
We don't have that
Right.
requirement. And let me just make something perfectly clear for myself, that I would love to see I'd love to see a path on a road that really needs it first. And I have no problem with making any landowner or developer that's gonna, subdivide or develop their property, pay in. I think that's a little bit of a misconception here, but we'd like to have it make sense for the landowner.
Okay.
I think, you know, we're going to need to be able to rule on whether there's sufficient right-of-way, or do we just require the easement and regardless of whether there's right-of-way? I mean, it gets a little tricky.
Right.
Yeah, we shouldn't have to worry about that, because my thoughts are, let's talk about this as a board of the top 3 things that we would like to give to the Paths Committee. I think what we talked about is the board needs specific direction on where pre-selected paths are going to go.
Yes, bingo.
Right? So pre-selected means you've already gone through the specifications on how much right-of-way is needed, the widths, all that stuff, and there's definition of what that is. Yeah. Okay. The other thing we need is, okay, so we good with that as the first
Yes.
one? Okay, second one, what tools do we have as a DRB when an application comes in for private landowner versus a developer that they just happen to have their land be where one of these pre-approved, pre-selected paths are? Because right now our toolbox is very limited, and I do think developers should be treated differently than private landowners. I would hate to put the burden on someone to develop 600 feet of sidewalk or path versus a developer.
But I think there'd have to be a threshold
It's
of,
gotta be
Like-
quantified, it's gotta be a
Yeah.
quantitative
I don't think it can
determination.
be
Every developer is a
frontage-based.
landowner.
Yeah,
Exactly.
A
So I think
developer
it-
is a landowner, but
maybe it's
So-
5 units or lots and larger.
Can-
Something like that.
You know.
May I just speak? Okay, so here's something that you guys can do right now. You can require an easement. It doesn't, you're not requiring any, like this thing that we've been talking about on Spear Street with the frontage on Spear Street, that an easement could be required right now. That was what we had in mind when we said leaving it up to your discretion. Because you'll notice in the, in the rural area, you are required to secure an easement. And so, it's our bad that that wasn't specifically mentioned as one of your
good to know what you want.
options, but.
10 feet,
Yeah,
20
how
feet.
wide is it?
Well, right, so what, in the rural area, the easement is, what does it say, between 10 and 20 or something? I think, it doesn't say, it's supposed to have said something.
It just says deeded easement parallel with town roads.
Okay. Isn't there I thought there was like a chart that talked
Oh, maybe.
about, okay, thanks.
Oh,
Okay, so,
here it is.
yeah, so here it says, develop, in the rural area, 15 minimum width, that must avoid mapped wetlands and flood hazard area. And in development roads in residential and commerce and industry, let's see, sidewalks, shared use path, shared use easement, so that's something you can do right now, 15-foot minimum width and must avoid mapped wetlands and flood hazard areas.
Oh, and so residential and commerce and industry is only one side of the road. It looks
Right,
like.
it's
Okay.
one side, so there's the case of which
So-
side.
Which side? I know.
Right. So I would suggest that, you consider, making that a requirement, certainly on Spear Street on the for developments on the north side, that at least an easement is secured. The west side, yes, the west side.
Do we have definitions? I'm sorry, I'm not up to speed on, do we have a definition? I'm sure we have a sidewalk definition. Do we have a shared use path and a future trail/walkway definition? So we know, is
Well,
that
we
8
have
feet
a-
wide or 10 feet wide?
Well,
or-
We have an easement dimension.
Yeah, we have an easement dimension, and then there's a reference to the Vermont Trails and Greenways Manual.
Okay.
So again, this is in the absence of having a public works standards that speak to these kinds of things. This was our kind of placeholder.
So, one thing to consider is in some cases, you're gonna run into structures, that are there, so we need to know what do we do if there's a structure that's, a problem? Whether it's public or private.
And if the easement, if it's intersected by a wetlands, does that mean the easement has to go around it? Or it just stops, it can't? be
Yes, it would
facilitated?
have to go around
It's
it.
gotta-
You can't, you're not allowed to.
Well, I know that versus stop, so I'm thinking of, there's a marshland that approaches the road, and so the property owner owns everything, so in essence, the town will be going for an easement that goes,
Yes.
dives into his property and then comes back out again.
Correct, yeah, to enable the public
Okay.
to have access there, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a big deal.
Okay.
What if the wetlands on both sides of the road?
Yeah.
There is, yeah. And the other thing is utilities.
You mean like above ground?
Above-ground utilities, and underground utilities, there's fire hydrants in certain areas, there's pump stations in certain areas, there's lots of telephone poles.
Right.
And those cost a lot of money if you have to move them. So in that, there's something that'll drive your costs right into orbit.
Right, well,
quickly.
and that, if it's an easement that you guys are establishing, maybe you can take into account some of those obstacles at the time and, move the easement to avoid those obstacles.
There's just one thing to consider, this is just an observation, is that the more tight and specific that these are, the less likely we are to be challenged in court.
Okay.
And that's happened before. I think there was quite an issue over the one on Webster Road
Okay.
by Garden Side.
Yes, okay.
And it's gonna cost money, and it's gonna take, and it, delays months and years. So if they're tightened up, it's much defensible.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is you need, the things we discussed to move this forward, and then it sounds like we need to do some back and forth with you on, are we here yet? Is this a regulation that makes sense, that you feel you have confidence implementing? And we can look into that and do some research on what those could be, because unfortunately, as I said, it's a bit putting the cart before the horse. We would love to be able to redo all the public works standards and have somebody come in and really help us develop place-based regulations, but that's another
That's
yet
been on
another
the agenda
project.
for over 10 years, so.
Yeah. So, but in the meantime, I'm sure we can do, provide a lot more fine-grained information than this stuff.
It would help.
When
Okay.
does the select board need to get involved? You take the proposal forward to the select board for
We
approvals?
need to, we need to draft up some language,
Okay.
and then we hold our own public hearings on it, and, assuming it passes muster with, the public, then the next step is to warn the select board, goes to the select board, and they have their own hearing process. And, the impact fees and all of that would, that would require an ordinance or amending an existing ordinance. I think we can already
It's probably a 5-6 month process at the inside, really.
It is. So what I think the strategy will probably be to work with Dean on what we can do really quickly now to clean up the existing regulations and add a little more clarity. And I think there's some things that we can do. And then some of the mechanisms and all of that are going to take a little bit longer to do. But, when there's a pressing need, people can prioritize and move things forward. So I think this is something that, we have this town plan language that supports all of this. And so I think there's going to be some disappointment, certainly from me, you've probably gathered, but other folks too, if we are, not moving forward with development outcomes that achieve the goals that were, highlighted and set as top priorities in the town plan. So it's on us to do that. So, but we will, really appreciate the opportunity to maybe partner with you guys pretty closely on, how we can resolve these outstanding issues, of which I had no idea there were as many as there are. So, like I said, I do appreciate the difficulty of your position, and, you need to do things by the book, and it has to be legally defensible, and it has to be fair and predictable, and all of those things. So,
And I think,
Yeah.
speaking of stormwater, we don't want to put in paved sections where, it's not going to be utilized because it's just more runoff. So I'd rather see it really thought out, which side of the street and,
Goes back to that plan again.
right.
I know.
That's the other side of the coin. It is impervious area, and so we're
Right.
definitely impacting stormwater, and a lot of these paths are gonna be in areas where there's, drainage conveyances, ditches, culverts, all that has to be taken into consideration.
I mean, I think the easements are critical, and I think ultimately you're going to get a better economy of scale when you build a long stretch,
Sure.
Right. And, that's the other thing. I mean, in your estimation, maybe that easement's not wide enough. I mean, maybe we need to
Yeah.
increase the size of that easement
It can't
to,
be our estimation, though. It has to be an estimation coming from the Paths Committee. It's got to be researched there. We're just implementing what we're told. We don't look us to determine, that easement needs to be this wide. we read to say, here's how it needs to be this wide. We're being told.
Yeah, and the easements, I didn't notice this table earlier, but the easement is spelled out at 15 feet, so.
It's a 15-foot minimum.
Minimum,
And that's a
yeah.
minimum dimension, you know, so I would think that in the case of, I don't know, you know, the worst possible combination, what, ledge outcroppings, wetland, and fiber optic cable, and a ditch, and, I mean, throw them all in, right? I mean,
Bus
you-
shelter.
yeah, I mean, you guys could, it should be enough to take into account the worst case scenario. So I think that sounds like maybe a way to, you know, and we've been partnering with the Paths Committee and partnering with the natural resources people too, to do things in a way that is resilient and sustainable, because of course that's really important.
Can I give you a hypothetical situation? What if we had an applicant come on a street, two applicants within a short period of time and opposite sides of a street? And do we tell these both people that we want to have an easement? You ultimately want to have an easement on both sides of a roadway for a path?
I would think that, this is hypothetical, I would think that we would want to say yes, just because in the eventuality of needing to cross over, for some reason, it just would give enough flexibility.
Right.
And again, the difficulty of, let's say, 40 years from now, and there's really different conditions, a lot of traffic, and other development decisions have been made, and, we're trying to put some kind of a facility in, and to have that easement would, make it very helpful. I mean, if you think of, that's how places urbanize, right? They have, this is pretty common, they have, these, so we have to sort of think, this is really about how Shelburne urbanizes, in a careful, thoughtful manner that does so in a way that preserves the character of the area that residents have decided they want for that particular section of the town. But, it is a process of urbanization, even if it's like super rural and that's still, and anytime there's the intervention by human beings, that's urbanism, right? So we can call it different things. So it's all a question of how we do that, and it should be context specific. So
On this chart where it says development along residential, commerce, industry, south, et cetera, sidewalk one side, so it would be nice if we knew, it should say in here then, both sides, or we want an easement on both sides. Because a developer, if somebody, or a landowner comes in and says, hey, there's already a path on the other side of the road or a sidewalk or whatever, they think, I'm out,
Yes.
Well, and also down a road like Spear, I think a multi-use path is more useful than a sidewalk. And,
I agree with you.
it's like, when you look at Dorset Street, I mean, South Burlington's like decades ahead of us, on paths and.
And they did
And
their things
that's-
incrementally, by the way. So,
Yeah.
that's as an example of there are a lot of
Yeah.
places in South Burlington where you're like, why is that little strip there? Well, it's because, they're,
Yeah.
that's how they've done it. So that may not be, the way that, the powers that be here decide it makes sense to do things in Shelburne. But anyway, I think we can make this a lot clearer, and I think it will be more palatable if people are, being asked to provide an easement. That seems pretty reasonable, and that could be an easement that could be used for other things too. One of the big things is the whole car use thing is changing, right? We're going to be outsourcing more and more things. Who knows, AI, in the years to come. So we're just trying to plan for, a public realm, even in little old Shelburne, that offers the flexibility.
With your paths committee hat on, what's the ideal situation in a path? Would the ideal situation would be to have like a bike lane on a roadway that's wide enough and another multi-use path for pedestrians separate?
It would all depend on the context. It all depends on the context. And that's what we've been residents have been made very clear. They want really context-specific, placemaking based facilities. So that may so what that means in practice is probably, like let's say on Bay Road, maybe there's a multi-purpose path for a portion of it, like between, let's say, the boat launch and Shelburne Farms or something like this. I'm spitballing here, right? And then other parts there's just a little sidewalk because you've got these houses that were once upon a time camps that are now full-time houses, and it just would wreck the character of the area. Right. So we're trying to figure all that out, but that's where what we're going towards, and it's really kind of in practice that'll mean probably looking at a road in terms of segments, right? And what is the section that makes sense in that particular section, and then that can change. I mean, you see this happen all the time in urbanized areas, that it's kind of opportunistic how all that stuff happens. So what's the Shelburne version of that,
Yeah, and that's the specificity that I think will make our job a lot easier.
Right, and which we lack now, but
Yeah.
I think this town plan process of talking about what we would like to have here going forward has made everybody really aware of, that we don't have zoning regulations that achieve that now by a long shot. They don't talk about, the quality of the place and the context and how things integrate with the surroundings. And now that has been the profile, the importance of doing that has really risen. And there's with this new understanding, there's new interest in pursuing that type of those types of development regulations. But it's been a long process just to kind of get people there, and and we did sort of things that were a little, kind of kooky, like the form-based code for the Route 7 corridor was adopted as an option, so sort of undermines the whole point of the thing. But, I think there's starting to be more comprehensive understanding of how all this stuff interrelates and how to move forward. And again, visualizing everything as much as we can, that's a whole other thing is, I think, going to be very helpful. I would love to see something kind of visualized for this. Maybe that can be one of the outcomes of this discussion, so that it's a little clearer. Talks to the map that the map direction that Jeff is looking for. So anyway.
Even for the major roads, if the chart started to say, okay, from this road on Spear, from this road to this road, it's a multi-use path on the west side, easements required, so that we can kind of just look down and say,
There's
okay.
probably a half a dozen or a dozen hot spots in town that really need some attention.
Yeah.
Right.
If we can focus on those.
I mean, right now, this is a bit of a one-size-fits-all, and we don't live, no one lives in that kind of a situation, right? So how do we do that? And on Spear, if we're calling, it's completely fair, if we're calling for a multi-use path, and then you've got the Morse in between neighborhood, what do you do with that? What's the vision there? Maybe that can become kind of a little, it just trickles down to a little sidewalk or something there, and of course that would, that would probably have to be vetted by those residents. And so I don't know, I don't know how this whole kit of parts works is complicated. Yeah. So, but anyway, it sounds like, anyway, I hope you guys are kind of understanding where we're trying to come from, and we will, I feel like, I'm very grateful for all the information and feedback that you guys gave, and we can maybe move things forward. And it sounds like, just looking at this, does everybody have this in front of them? No. Oh, they do? Okay. Table 3, maybe not. Oh. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. But maybe, maybe one of the quickest things we can do is just to tighten that up to clarify easements on both sides of the road, like for starters.
That's always a more definite.
Yeah, just to, kind of, an immediate sort of placeholder that,
So the kind of like, when I see in here, at our discretion, like, let's say, for example, we had an applicant come in and we have this requirement, you need to provide us with a 15-foot wide easement, and then there's some circumstance on the parcel, a building, whatever, that, gee whiz, we can't put a 15-foot wide easement there, so, okay, that, it seems like is in our discretion, yeah, let's do 8, or whatever is feasible.
right.
Because it would just turn a project in, or a renovation, or ultimately an improvement to a piece of property, it would turn it into a non-starter.
Right.
And we don't want to do that, I don't think.
Well, yeah, and so that's why you guys have the discretion to be
Right.
able to kind of respond to those
We
real-life
do,
conditions.
but then I'd prefer not to have our discretion be perceived by the planning commission and the Bikes and Paths Committee as ignoring what your goal is. That's what I feel like's happening. If we use some discretion, and we have, I'd rather not have it, be interpreted that, we don't want paths, we don't want sidewalks. I think that's a misconception.
Well, I would say that whatever discretion, however that's applied, it would still need to support the ability of somebody to walk there. Or, as long as that pedestrian connectivity were connected, we're able to move forward. Even if it happens in, less than,
Ideals.
yeah, an ideal, you're responding to the circumstances.
Yep.
So.
I mean, there's not a lot of discretion the way it's written right now.
No, there isn't, it's not,
Right,
and that's,
right.
so I think that
So,
would,
so I think,
Yeah.
I think that's something that we can respond to.
Okay.
But we just want to make sure that whatever the outcome is, there's the multimodality in whatever way you guys decide it has to happen is achieved.
yep, just so long as you, but you have to keep in mind that what the decisions we make, we're a quasi judicial board.
Right.
And it's gotta be defensible, and it's gotta be based in the documents here. It's not we can't do things because gee whiz, we think you ought to do that.
Right.
We can't do it.
If our decisions align with the master plan, the master
Well-
plan has been thought out, details have been looked at, and it makes sense that everything plays together. That you can work with.
Yep,
Yeah.
something to fall back on.
And that's defensible too.
Defensible.
When I say master plan, I'm talking about, here's the paths, here's what they look like. Here's the creeks and the wetlands they're gonna go over and deal with, how they're dealing with them.
And that's also the context in which discretion works the best for us, because, yes, this says a 15-foot easement, the conditions allow this, but we kind of know what we're working towards, so we can use that discretion, with the same goals in mind.
Yes.
As opposed to, reason discretion, we have no idea what, the master plan is.
It seems arbitrary if
Right.
it's not, if there's no plan for us.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
It's like the paths committee's gonna have their work cut out for them.
Paths and planning, yeah.
You guys
Okay.
already have a full plate.
All right.
Looking at the back wall there, you've got a full plate on town plan rewrite. Thanks. Did they change that to 8 years now?
Yes, this one will be, when this gets enacted, it'll be, we have to do the next one for 8 years.
That's good news.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work.
Yes, it is.
All right.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming, we do appreciate it. Anything else on the agenda? Nope, no other business, then I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Thank you, all those in favor? Aye.